Yeah, so the extreme weather can really not only impact consumers, but impact retailers. So Sammy, I want to direct this next question to you so we can really dig a little bit deeper here. Because again, we talked about how both climate and weather are impacting retailers and consumers, but there's a lot of use cases to employ to help businesses manage this. That can be reporting as well as other activities around merchandising and operations to better gain insights on what's happening, support sustainability initiatives. So can you share some of the common use cases at a more practical or realist, real level that retailers are employing?
Yeah, no, happy to. Great question. Maybe the first use case I'll start with is everyone's favorite word, regulation. I'm sure we're all thrilled to death about it, but if you look at what's happened over the last, call it 3-4 years, you kind of mentioned about 7 years, regulations around climate, weather, all the climate change type stuff, that's increasing, right? And people are starting to see it has a material effect. And so you're starting to see a lot more financial disclosures, right? So think your CFO office, right? So your CFO having to report on material impacts on weather volatility or climate volatility. And that's becoming more and more material. So you're now starting to see the financial world starting to wake up that there is an impact, whether it's on customers, operations, and so on and so forth. And so you're starting to see companies starting to really up their game in terms of data, right? So just as you think about how all the systems and processes and all that kind of stuff you have around sales data, we're having to do the same things around climate data. And that's a new muscle that people are having to kind of build and train on themselves. They used to do it on a voluntary basis, but now as these new regulations start to stand up, right, whether it's around freshness, food traceability, whether it's around corporate sustainability out of Europe or Asia, whether it's around traceability, you're starting to see a lot more regulation coming in to better understand the resilience of a company. And that's really what weather volatility is about. Now let's couple to where does that actually come into practicality for operation? My favorite use case is always the impact on supply chain, right? You think about the impact of weather volatility on your suppliers. We saw that during COVID. You talked about weather events last year, interesting event, when we had all the hurricanes on the East Coast, there was a massive shortage in IVs, right? IV bags, just because the facilities that made them were affected in North Carolina. So you're starting to see supply chains affecting downstream operations because your suppliers aren't able to get it. My other favorite one is, shipping products from Kansas to Washington. It's starting to get harder because as the weather rises, those rail lines are actually starting to expand more, so it's actually interrupting rail traffic. Not something you would have thought of, but that is a material impact. So you're starting to see goods and products and services being affected by weather-related events, right? So as people are getting more and more attuned to having to report this data, getting a better handle on data, especially in terms of financial, they're now taking and using it for customer expectations. One last use case that I find is, whether you how you think about sustainability or climate change, the one thing that's clear, especially from a customer perspective, is that their perceptions are changing, their expectations are changing, and that personalization around, whether it's, food waste, whether it's around carbon emissions, that's increasing from the consumer side. And the more that we can use this weather-related data, the weather-sensitive, weather-driven demand to really drive that sort of connection between what customers are expecting and driving your operations to really kind of minimize waste, emissions, supply chain risks, all that kind of good stuff that affects our day-to-day operations, drives cost up, means that's actually savings we can pass on, but more importantly, we can drive better products, more, sustainable, more resilient products to our customers, which is what they're hopefully driving for.